Well, hey, you know who had trouble getting through the gears today? Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin on his way home early tonight. He did not stay at My Place Hotels in Kansas. This edition of Post-Race Conversations brought to you by My Place Hotel, our official hotel sponsor over here at frontstretch.com. You can stay at My Place, get 10% off nationwide using code FRONTSTRETCH. This racing season, be sure to make My Place your place. I make this joke every time someone goes out and dominates, wins a race in handed fashion, but Kansas is actually legitimately Kyle Larson's place. Kansas to Kyle Larson is what Lowe's Motor Speedway used to be to Jimmy Johnson.
I think there's a lot of tracks that are to Kyle Larson what they used to be to Jimmy Johnson, but I mean the facts. I mean Larson just completely dominated today. You guys are right about that. Won the pole, won both stages. Led 221 laps of the 267, which is a track record for the most ever led by one driver. It looked like in the final stage, he lost the clean air. It looked like Chase Elliott was going to get the better of him. But then, Brad wrecked. We'll get to that later. And then all the cautions started piling up. There was a 4 pit stop for the 9. And then with Christopher Bell, Alex Bowman, Larson just drove off into the sunset, to take the checkered flag.
It was another, what we've seen a couple times this season already, where Kyle Larson just goes out and puts on a driving clinic, as he is known to do. Something very particular about the tracks where he does that. Kansas is not at all like Homestead, except for the fact that you make speed up near the wall. And we all know that Kyle Larson is really good up near the wall.
Yep. And I think, even Homestead and Kansas, they're different style tracks, but they're the same length. And it's, the intermediates have been really, really special for Larson, Cliff Daniels, and that 5 team. Actually, after this race, let me do the quick math in my head. Larson is in the next gen era. Larson has led over 1,600 laps on 1.5 mile tracks in the next gen era. The second place is Christopher Bell, who's only led about 600. So Larson is just completely gapping the field in how much he's dominating these races. He doesn't always win, but when he wins, he pretty much does it in dominating fashion or in exciting fashion like last year.
Yeah, and if you go back and look at the NASCAR statistics, in the last 20 years, Kyle Larson is statistically the best driver at Kansas. He's outpaced Denny Hamlin, Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., guys who have a lot of laps at that track. The 5 team went out and made a statement today.
Yep, and I can't do the math off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure if Larson isn't already all-time laps leader at Kansas, he's getting very, very close to that title. And also, he's also getting close to becoming the all-time winner here, too. This was his 3rd Kansas win after 2021 and last year. And one win away is Denny Hamlin with 4. He's the current leader, so with how good he was this May, Larson has a chance in September to try to tie him on the all-time win list here.
Hamlin has led 518 career laps at Kansas. Larson 702 as of this morning, so that number has changed a bunch. Martin Truex held the mark prior to today with 911.
Yeah.
So if Larson was able to put up 221. 220. So he did 221 today. So he is now the all-time laps leader at Kansas. So just rename it Kyle Speedway.
I mean, there's a lot of tracks you could do that, but I think since we're talking about Kyle Larson, laps led domination, he also crossed 10,000 laps led in his Cup Series career in this race. This is his 32nd win, and he's now he's third of full-time active drivers in laps led, only behind Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch.
He, certainly, again, we all know he is incredibly good at what he does. And if not for, I think, a number of DNFs and kind of unforced errors, he'd have a lot more than 32 career wins.
Yep. And also think about, his time in Ganassi, where he dominated so many races, but often didn't win them. Now he goes to Hendrick, and he just has been lights out. There's obviously been some dominant races he hasn't won, but on average, they're winning at a far higher clip than they are now.
Other than Kyle Larson pretty much having, this race on lockdown from the jump, what else did we see today? Uncharacteristically bad day for the 11 team. Couple mechanical failures in this one. Allmendinger has an engine go up. Hamlin's transaxle falls out of the car. Starting to see some attrition with these cars, which is something we haven't seen in the last couple of years. And I find that fantastic. That's good for racing.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see more attrition. I mean, if you're a fan and your favorite driver goes out because of a failure, you're not gonna like it. But I think, a lot of what racing is missing nowadays is just the man versus machine factor, and how you also had to take care of your equipment, or else you would blow up or break something. And next week's the Coca-Cola 600. So with all the mechanical failures we've seen recently, I wonder how many cars will be able to make it to the finish then.
It's been a while since the 600's been marked, by engines, transmissions, driver fatigue. Should be good. Should be good in a couple weeks there in Charlotte. And of course we all, knock on wood, hope the weather holds for Kyle Larson, the Indy 500 Coke 600 double. Looking at the rundown today, shout out to Corey Heim in his first start for 2311, bringing that car home 13th, the best finish out of the 2311 cars, and finished better than his car owner.
Yep. Obviously, it didn't look like it at the start of the day. He qualified 28th, was kind of running in the 30s on the first stage. But, I talked to him after the race, and, as the race went on, he kept getting better and better, got back on the lead lap with all those cautions in the final stage, and then just drove up to 13th. I asked him if, today his performance, met his expectations of what he hoped to do. And he said, obviously, the first stage wasn't great, but he felt like the second and third stage, he was kind of feeling right at home and, doing what he believed he could do before, this race started.
Ryan Blaney having another good day. Chase Briscoe, after a rough start to the season, has put together another good day. And John Hunter Nemechek quietly with the top 10. I think that might be 2 weeks in a row where the 42 car inside the top 10.
That is correct. Finished 8th at Texas last week, 10th here today. I also got to talk to him, and that's 4 top 10s already. I think that's the most he's had in a season. If not, it ties the most he's had in a season. Just keep grinding. They keep grinding away. And I asked him, well, what's the change? What's been different this year with how well you guys are running compared to last year? He said, just the people, teamwork, communication, and so on. So, there's been surprises, disappointments, and I'd say Legacy Motor Club has been a fairly good surprise to start this year.
Eric Jones had some speed before he got caught up in one of the many late restart melees that have marked this race and Texas last week. Guys who needed a good week and didn't have them again. Kyle Busch had speed at points during the race, and ends up finding himself backwards in the grass again. What does the 8 team need to do to turn their season around at this point?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing about it, because you think back to Circuit of the Americas in March, and Kyle Busch in the best car by far. If the cautions at the end fall a little bit differently, he might be going to victory lane. And my thought was they're clearly a lot better than they were last year, but it seems like they had a couple of good runs after that, but now it seems like they're kind of back to that slump they had in 2024. I'm not really sure, but it's also been a bit of a rough stretch for ECR and the ECR engines. Trackhouse has been lacking in speed a little bit. Austin Dillon's been running well, but Kyle Busch is kind of back to his slump last year. And then obviously, talking about ECR, AJ Allmendinger was very, very angry, about the engine letting go that early.
He did have some choice words for the engine department there at ECR. You would certainly expect one of these things to last more than 10 laps? Not even.
It was 6.
6, yeah, that's not awesome. But hey, engines break. We don't know how many races that particular power plant had. Denny Hamlin mentioned last week that he was on his 3rd race with the engine that let go in Texas. So that one may have been close to mileaging out. I'm sure we'll find out later on this week. Looking at the rundown though, the teams we expect at this point of the season to be fast. Surprise maybe a little for RFK Racing. Ryan Preece, Chris Buescher finished 7th and 8th. Keselowski was in contention until he had a tire go down. That team performing well. Ford very fast this weekend. Blaney, Josh Berry, Joey Logano, Austin Cindric, all inside the top 12. Josh Berry, again, with the absolute rocket ship.
Yep. Ford really showed out. Even with Larson dominating as much as they did, Ford also had a great race. I mean, you got to feel for Brad Keselowski, though. He's 30. I think he's 33rd in points now. Darlington, he was fast, had an issue there. All of the super speedways where he usually has speed, he got crashed there. And here running second, running down Chase Elliott for the lead. He has a blown tire at the worst possible moment, and he finishes 37th. I mean, it has been a very, very rough stretch for that team. But, Brad said that, all of his sights, his emotions are just focusing on go win the Coke 600 now and, turn their season around.
All it takes is, one, in a race that was just over 3 hours in length, 7 cautions for 37 laps, including your stage breaks, 15 lead changes, which when you think about the race and the domination that Kyle Larson enforced his will upon the field, 15 seems like a lot. You think, well, there was, a lot of green flag pit stops there, and cycles through. But, what else do you say at this point other than Kyle Larson went out and did one of those races where a team and a car and a driver just have it figured out?
I mean, before we get into their domination, I think there was definitely a point in the race where it looked like he wasn't going to win. If you remember, starting the final stage, Chase Elliott, who was running him down at the end of stage 2, he won the race off pit road, and he just took off and set sail from Larson, who faded back to third behind him and Brad. And it was Brad's flat tire and wreck that was pretty much the pivotal point of the race, because they all pit. Larson is back, was back in the top 2. Chase Elliott loses 10 spots on pit road, falls to 12th, never makes it up, and finishes 15th at the end, despite having one of his best races of the season speed-wise. And also, if you think about it, Denny Hamlin was 4th at the time, before Brad wrecked, and that's when he had his transaxle problem and stalled after a pit stop and went to the garage as well. So, it was basically that, that caution was the turning point of the race, because Brad wrecking then indirectly took out Hamlin and Elliott from winning contention too, and those were probably the strongest cars to him. But but Bell was also top 5 all day. Bowman was really fast too. They put up as good a fight as they could. Bell got it to within a second at the end, but again, ultimately none of them had was able to match Larson and the 5 team today.
A couple more laps and Blaney gets by Bell. I think they were separated by half a car length at the stripe. A couple more laps and Kyle Larson's right front tire may not make it.
Yeah. I was going to say, it was about, with about 5 to go, it looked like it was going to be about a 2-second margin of victory. But as they came down the white flag, the final margin of victory was 7/10. So if he did indeed have that tire going down, this is the perfect lap for the race to end on for him.
Absolutely. Trey, you watched the race today. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great race again at Kansas. It was refreshing to see multiple grooves and passing outside of Kyle Larson being Kyle Larson. I think if it would have been more interesting late for Kyle Larson, he had the cautions fall his way, which sometimes that happens in racing. I think his short run car, and shout out to Michael Massey for saying, asking if I talk today. I can talk. That is our own Michael Massey, by the way. Just want to point that out. But
thanks for watching, Michael. We appreciate you having in the peanut gallery tonight.
But I was just gonna say, yeah, but a butt whipping by Kyle Larson. I will say this. I tweeted this out. Kyle Larson started the same way a month of May last year with a win, and then obviously qualified so well at the Indy 500, which may be different this year. Then he ended up obviously, what happened on the last weekend of May. So here's to, and my only hope is that the month of May, and not necessarily winning, it's a repeat of last year, doesn't end as bad as it did for Kyle Larson. We get to see him chase history at the end of this month. That is my main takeaway from this race. Kyle Larson dominates. Corey Heim proved he's a special talent, and bad luck for Brad, as y'all have already talked about. But ultimately, Kyle Larson kicks off his month of May the same way he kicked off last year with a win at Kansas. Can he end it better than he did last year?
Well, whether you like him as a driver, whether you're a fan of what he does in the Cup car, I think as a fan of motorsport, you have to cheer for him in 2 weeks, just for the sake of the achievement, to join that list of drivers. Tony Stewart, Robbie Gordon, John Andretti, the guy, and those, guys who have done that and put themselves through that task of running 1,100 miles in one day. You have to cheer for the effort. And you want to see him. Yeah. Is he a guy who's got a chance to win both? Absolutely. But so much has to go right for him, especially at Indianapolis. And, I'm not superstitious by any stretch of the imagination, but having been to that track and been there for the 500, it's a facility. People will say the track picks the winner. And is IMS going to pick Kyle Larson this year? I don't know. We'll see. But we got 500 miles to watch him do something cool in a race car, which, again, if you're a fan of motorsports, watching Kyle Larson drive a race car is just neat. Like, he's just fast. He's very good at what he does. And I think we should all appreciate that and celebrate it more.
I think, you got to hope that, first of all, that the weather cooperates. I think the drivers going to be cheering for him, but, in the case of Ryan Blaney, he was asked about, and he said, I hope he finishes fourth behind the 3 Team Penske cars. So, but yeah, I think everyone that's a motorsports fan, IndyCar, NASCAR, they hope he completely double this year. But that's going to be in 2 weeks' time. Next week's the All-Star race, and Larson's been pretty good there as of late. We've all heard of even year Joey Logano. But there's also odd year Kyle Larson for the All-Star race. 2017, he finishes second. 2019, he wins. 2021, he wins. 2023, he wins. Can he win the All-Star race for the 4th consecutive odd year in a row?
The only time we need to hope for rain over the next 2 weeks is a little bit of moisture at North Wilkesboro. Get the rain tire back on those cars, cause some chaos, make the All-Star race interesting, because it's lost its. Off on a tangent, because we've already talked about Kyle Larson and his domination as we wrap things up here tonight. The All-Star race needs to be a shaken up more than just a random caution that, the promoter can throw. Let the track down.
Given what can change at the moment and what NASCAR, the teams are willing to change, I don't think there's not too much to do just because of the next-gen car and the way it drives. And I think, it's disappointing because, North Wilkesboro coming back was this really, really great thing that happened. It was, a return more than 2 decades in the making. And it's just, with this car, it's just kind of fallen flat, which is disappointing to see.
It is. And, the teams had an opportunity, and we'll never really know the true reasoning behind it. Hamlin said it was cost. Other teams have said cost. I think both parties called each other's bluff when it came to the next gen car and how to fix it. And we had a neat opportunity to see teams come out and do something clever with that car to make it faster. There goes a winning Team Hendrick crew member behind you. So yeah, next week we've got the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. Cars Tour is there. We'll have coverage on our grassroots channels for the Cars Tour racing at North Wilkesboro. Of course, all our All-Star race weekend action also on frontstretch.com. Indy 500 qualifying on frontstretch.com, and then Memorial Day weekend, the high holy days of motorsports between Monaco, F1, the Indy 500 at noon, and then the Coke 600, the nightcap. IndyCar, speaking of guys going out and absolutely putting on a clinic, Alex Palou has just passed another car. He has stretched his lead even further and takes another checkered flag. Kyle Larson is the Alex Palou of NASCAR, and Alex Palou is the Kyle Larson of IndyCar until next week. And then Kyle Larson's the Kyle Larson of IndyCar.
So, something I do want something to add also about Alex Palou and his dominance is that the gap between first and second in points is the same as the gap between second and 22nd. That's how far ahead he is.
That's a butt kicking.
Oh yeah, and with how great he is at the Indy 500, but hasn't won it yet. Can he make it 5 wins in 6 races?
Certainly could. He's very good there. He's going to have to contend with Joseph Newgarden and Pato O'Ward. But looking forward to watching those rivalries continue to grow and unfold on that side. And, over on the NASCAR side, we got, another Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell duel. And, we'll watch that continue on to next week. All right, fellas, final thoughts as we wrap up tonight.
I think, there's probably going to be some people that look at the 5 dominating and say this is kind of a blah race. And, Darlington, Bristol, they weren't the greatest, even though Larson and Byron dominated those. But I think, if you look behind the battle for first place, I think there was a lot of action. The tires clearly meant a lot. You had comers and goers throughout the field. The caution after caution after caution was a little frustrating, but I think overall it was a very good race. But compared to the Kansas races we've had in the past, it's a high bar to live up to.
The two storylines away from this one are Kyle Larson goes out and leads 211 to 267 laps, and there were plenty of good seats still available at Kansas Speedway today.
Yeah.
You don't want attendance to be a storyline, but I think when the racing has been as good as it is there, and the crowd didn't show up, it makes you kind of raise an eyebrow.
I think another thing is that we've gone to an era where it seems like one date works well for a lot of places. Even Texas with one date, it had a great crowd for Texas last weekend. And if you also think about, NASCAR's changes to the schedule, we now have races in St. Louis and a race in Iowa, which are all pretty close to Kansas City, and they could siphon off fans that want to go to those instead. So, I want Kansas to stay at 2 dates because I think it's some of the best racing on the schedule, but just in terms of attendance-wise, there's demand for one each year.
Yeah, there are a lot of entertainment options there in the Midwest, certainly, and some folks may be saving. They may have spent their racing money on Indy 500 tickets, which is also in the Midwest. So, without further ado, credit to Kyle Larson again, picking up another win on the season. That team is in midseason form already, and he looks to cap off a fantastic month of May with 4, probably some dirt races in there. He's got 4 race weekends left in 2 weeks in May. So we'll see what Kyle Larson does as we move forward. And we got the All-Star race next week, and that's going to be what it's going to be. And I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about after North Wilkesboro. So I got nothing. I'm out. I'm out of topics. We've covered it all.
Yes, we have.
Tune in to Happy Hour right here on the Front Stretch YouTube channel on Tuesday, 7:30 live right here on the YouTube channel. That's my only plug.
He speaks twice and plugs his own show. Trey Lyle, ladies and
gentlemen. And y'all are smarter than me, so I just let y'all. I'm a good point guard. I just let when the other guys are cooking, I just let them cook.
You let them feed. Hey, check out all our post-race coverage on frontstretch.com, our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, frontstretch.com. This edition of Post-Race Conversations is brought to you by My Place Hotels, the official hotel sponsor of Front Stretch. Plush beds, in-room kitchens, they're pet-friendly. You can get 10% off any stay nationwide with code FRONTSTRETCH this racing season. Be sure to make My Place your place. And until next weekend, for Steven Stump and Trey Lyle, I'm Kyle Benjamin. We'll see you after North Wilkesboro.
My Place Hotels is proud to be the official hotel partner of Front Stretch. With plush beds, in-room kitchens, and pet-friendly hotels, My Place makes for the perfect pit stop when traveling. Front Stretch fans can use promo code FRONTSTRETCH to save 10% on your stay at any of our nationwide properties. Sign up for our Stay Rewarded program to get even more savings. With My Place Hotels, don't just stay, stay rewarded.